Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Maybe have to be louder.
I'm going to have to be.
A little bit louder, yeah.
Okay, so we'll start again. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for getting up earlier and coming to the seminar. I really appreciate that. This is my first time with this group, and I'm having a blast with. I see the love and the affection and the acceptance, and it's just great. So thank all of you for participating in that. As you can see, the title of my seminar is The Heart Knows. I won't be taking comments while I'm speaking, but I plan to leave some time at the end for discussion. I'll be sharing some scientific research about the heart as well as related Bible verses. I want to be clear that my foundation for presenting this information is that God is our source of all things. Whatever gifts or abilities we discover we have come from God. I'm going to touch on various topics that relate to the heart to give an overview of the information from my research. We are probably all familiar with the phrases, put your heart into it, learn it by heart, speak from your heart. We know there's more to the heart than just the physical muscle that pumps blood through our bodies. Here's a few basics about the physical aspects of the heart. By the 25th day of life, when a woman may not even know she's pregnant, the embryonic heart has formed and started to beat. Physically, the heart is an amazingly powerful and tireless muscle called the myocardium, and as we know, is located in the center of the chest. It consists of two pumps situated side by side. Each side has its own unique energy and job to do. The left side pump is the most powerful, sending blood through thousands of miles of vessels under sufficient pressure to shoot water about 6 feet in the air. The right side pump propels blood primarily to and from the lungs, under just enough pressure to shoot water about a foot in the air. The heart beats approximately 100,000 times a day and 40 million times a year. The heart transports about 100 gallons of blood per hour through a vascular system that, if extended, could be wrapped around the earth 2.5 times. Before I get into the research about the heart, I want to look at a few of the 826 references in the Bible to the heart. I'll read the verses from my notes instead of turning to them. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy might. Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 12. Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 12. What does the Lord your God require of you, but to fear or reverence the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, to love him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. 1 Samuel 16, 7. 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 7. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, and the Lord looks on the heart. 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 39. 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 39. Then hear thou in heaven thy dwelling place, and forgive, and act, and render to each whose heart thou knowest, according to all his ways. For thou only knowest the hearts of all the children of men. Jeremiah 17, 9 through 10. Jeremiah chapter 17, verses 9 through 10. The heart is deceitful above all things, and desperately wicked. Who can know it? I, the Lord, search the heart. I try the reins, even to give every man according to his ways and according to the fruit of his doings. I have heard verse 9 used to indicate that all hearts are wicked. This has been very troubling to me as a person who wants my heart to be pleasing to God. When I looked at the context in Jeremiah 16, and the beginning of Jeremiah 17, it's talking about the sin of Judah and those who depart from God. While in the human condition, the heart can be wicked and deceitful, but those who love God, have his spirit, and walk in his ways can have a different heart. Matthew chapter 5, verse 8. Matthew chapter 5, verse 8. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. 1 Kings chapter 15, verse 14. 1 Kings chapter 15, verse 14. But the high places were not removed. Nevertheless, Asa's heart was perfect with the Lord all his days. 2 Kings chapter 23, verse 25. 2 Kings chapter 23, verse 25. It speaks about Josiah. And like unto him was there no king before him that turned to the Lord with all his heart, with all his soul, and with all his might, according to all the law of Moses. Neither after him arose there any like him. Luke 6, 45. Luke 6, 45. A good man out of the good treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is good. And an evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is evil. For of the abundance of the heart his mouth speaks. There are also verses that reference the clean heart, the whole heart, and the upright heart. We can choose to have a heart for God instead of an evil heart. Now for the research findings about the heart. Traditionally, scientists have focused primarily on the heart's responses to the brain's commands. Newer research has found that the communication between the heart and the brain is an ongoing two-way dialogue, and each influences the other's function. The heart actually sends more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. Our heart has its own brain, nervous system with 40,000 neurons, and can act independently of the cranial brain. It can learn, remember, make decisions, feel, and sense things. We are able to sense when a situation arises that might be harmful to us, or we can feel a connection with someone the first time we meet them. The heart makes and secretes a number of hormones and neurotransmitters that impact the entire body. It also makes oxytocin, which is involved in cognitive function, trust, friendship, and establishing bonds between people. The energy of the heart molds our body and face. It creates a mask that over time becomes etched with the tracings of the energy we send. Leftover wrinkles from the too frequent look of disgust show us that the heart had trouble connecting, just as the smile marks next to the eyes indicate that a loving heart has been energizing the body. Nearness, not absence, makes the heart grow fonder. The more often we are exposed to someone, the more we are soaked in their energy, and the more we become attached to and bonded with them. This can also create an unhealthy connection to someone. Psychologists call this the repeated exposure effect, or the mere exposure effect. The Bible has some comments on that as well. Proverbs chapter 13, verse 20. Proverbs chapter 13, verse 20. He that walketh with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools shall be destroyed. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 24 and 25. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 24 and 25. Make no friendship with a man that is given to anger, and with a wrathful man thou shalt not go, lest thou learn his ways and get a snare to thy soul. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 33. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 33. Be not deceived. Evil companionships corrupt good morals. Our choice of friends and our life partner has a tremendous effect on us. The heart is the most powerful source of electromagnetic energy in the human body, producing the largest rhythmic electromagnetic field of any of the body's organs. This field, measured in the form of an electrocardiogram, ECG, can be detected anywhere on the surface of the body. The magnetic field produced by the heart is more than 100 times greater in strength than the field generated by the brain, and can be detected up to 3 feet away from the body in all directions using squid-based magnetometers. HeartMath Institute has been conducting research on the heart for over 25 years. Their website is heartmath.com. Heartmath.com. The Institute suggests the heart's field is an important carrier of information. HeartMath Institute, or HMI for short, has performed several studies that show the magnetic signals generated by the heart have the capacity to affect individuals around us. Every cell in our bodies is bathed in an external and an internal environment of fluctuating, invisible magnetic forces. They have also found the heart generates a pressure wave that travels rapidly throughout the arteries, much faster than the actual flow of blood that we feel as our pulse. The pressure wave forces the blood cells through the capillaries to provide oxygen and nutrients to the cells and expand the arteries, causing them to generate a relatively large electrical voltage. Positive emotions send out a very different signal throughout the body. When we experience uplifting emotions such as appreciation, joy, care, and love, our heart rhythm pattern becomes highly ordered, looking like a smooth, harmonious wave. This is called a coherent heart rhythm pattern. It's possible to generate a coherent rhythm simply by breathing slowly and regularly. There are a number of different rhythms we can use. One is a 10-second rhythm. You breathe in to a count of 5, and you exhale to a count of 5. During stress and negative emotions, when the heart rhythm pattern is erratic and disordered, the corresponding pattern of neural signals traveling from the heart to the brain inhibits higher cognitive functions. This limits our ability to think clearly, to remember, learn, reason, and make effective decisions. The more ordered and stable pattern of the heart's input to the brain during positive emotional states has the opposite effect. It facilitates cognitive function and reinforces positive feelings and emotional stability. This means that learning to generate increased heart rhythm coherence by sustaining positive emotions not only benefits the entire body, but also profoundly affects how we perceive, think, feel, and perform. I'm going to briefly mention another area of research done by HeartMath Institute that is directly connected to having a coherent heart. This is heart rate variability. Heart rate variability, or HRV. There are a number of online sites that talk about this. Heartbeats are not simply a mechanical rhythm, but an intelligent language to which our entire body responds. The intelligence of the heart reveals itself in its optimal condition in a state of cardiac coherence. This is measured by monitoring the heart rate variability. HRV is a measure of the beat-to-beat changes in heart rate. It's what happens between the beats we hear. It is suggested that the heart is sensitive to emotional changes, and this shows up in the heart rhythm patterns. It indicates a person's capacity to adapt effectively to stress and environmental demands. While a large degree of instability is detrimental, too little variation can also be unhealthy. We need an optimal level of variability. Emotions, thoughts, or exercise change our heartbeat. This change in heart rhythms also affects how our brain functions. Positive emotions help synchronize our body systems. The research over the last several years suggests rhythmic heart rate variability is an indicates a more optimal state of health. There are apps that can be downloaded to smartphones and devices that can be purchased that measure heart rate variability, and this can help us stay in a healthier state. The human body has many mechanisms for detecting its external environment. The most obvious are sense organs, which react to touch, temperature, select ranges of light, sound waves, etc. The interaction between two human beings, such as a patient and a doctor, or a discussion between friends, is a very sophisticated dance which involves many subtle factors. Most people, as I did, tend to think of communication in terms of facial movements, voice qualities, gestures, and body movements. There is new evidence to support that a subtle yet influential electromagnetic or energetic communication system operates just below our conscious level of awareness. When people are engaged in deep conversation, they begin to fall into a subtle dance, synchronizing their movements and postures, voice pitch, speaking rates, and length of pauses between responses. HeartMath Institute has performed experiments on these types of interactions. They have concluded that the nervous system acts as an antenna, which is tuned to and responds to the magnetic fields produced by the hearts of other individuals. The data shows it is possible for the magnetic signals radiated by the heart of one individual to influence the brain rhythms of another, which can occur at conversational distances. The degree of coherence in the receiver's heart rhythms appear to determine whether his or her brain waves synchronize to the other person's heart. Here are a couple examples. Using signal averaging techniques, HMI was able to detect synchronization between a mother's brain waves, her EEG, and her baby's heartbeats, ECG. The pair were not in physical contact, but when the mother focused her attention on the baby, her brain waves synchronized to the baby's heartbeats. They were not able to detect that the infant's EEG synchronized to the mother's heartbeats. Another example is of an animal's heart rhythm pattern shifting in response to a human's shift of emotional states. This was a collaborative study with Ellen Gerke, PhD, who consciously shifted into a coherent state while sitting in a corral with her horse, neither touching nor petting it. Remember that coherence means being in an emotional state of appreciation, being calm, feeling joy or love. When she shifted into a coherent state, the horse's heart rhythm pattern also shifted to a more ordered pattern. In other trials, very similar shifts in horses' HRV patterns were seen in 3 out of 4 horses' heart rhythms. One of the horses that did not show any response was well known for not relating to humans or other horses. Having a coherent, peaceful heart helps our immune system. To show the healing power of a coherent and caring heart on the immune system, David McClellan showed college students a documentary about the life of Mother Teresa, whose heart was full of love for others. Another group of students saw a film about Nazi triumphs during World War II. The students who watched Mother Teresa experienced a profound increase in their immunoefficiency as compared to those who watched the war film. Watching a person with a coherent, open heart seemed to have made the students' hearts more coherent and open. The Random Acts of Kindness Foundation tells how kindness increases serotonin and oxytocin, the feel-good hormones. Those people who do an act of kindness, who receive an act of kindness, and who watch an act of kindness between others all have an increase in these hormones. It's a win-win for all who are involved. Just one random act of kindness a day has good health benefits. We can receive healing benefits with the presence of healing hearts all around us, joining with our heart. Here's an example. There are over 1 million cesarean sections performed in the United States each year. It's the most common surgical procedure. Studies have shown that this procedure can be reduced by 50% when a mother has the continuous presence of a supportive woman called a doula during labor and delivery. Dr. Dean Ornish is well known for advocating diet and lifestyle changes to treat and prevent heart disease. He has shown that significant changes in lifestyle, including less angry, hostile interactions with others, can actually reverse heart disease and unclog arteries without surgery. Dr. Ornish's natural program has been so successful treating heart disease that some insurance companies will cover the cost. Now I want to talk about humor and laughter and how they affect the heart. Proverbs chapter 17, verse 22. Proverbs chapter 17, verse 22. A cheerful heart is a good medicine, but a downcast spirit dries up the bones. Humor is one of the best ways of avoiding aggression, releasing tension, reducing anxiety, and enhancing immune function, all of which are healthy states for and of the heart. It also helps to prevent heart disease. Laughter is the outward manifestation of increased heart rate and oxygen intake, accompanied by some of the most healthy physiological changes that can happen to our bodies. A hearty belly laugh exercises the diaphragm, contracts the abs, and even works out the shoulders, leaving muscles more relaxed afterward. It provides a good workout for the heart. People who laugh a lot on a regular basis have a lower blood pressure than the average person. Regular laughter can be like getting a gym membership for your heart. Contrast this to the increased heart rate that accompanies anger, which leads to toxic changes in the cardiovascular system. Sometimes we laugh until we cry. These tears from laughing connect us with others and lighten our burdens. Our emotional tears from both laughing and sadness have a different composition than what is present in what's called basal tears we have from cutting onions or from irritated eyes. The chemicals found in our emotional tears appear to help us heal. We do have a third type of tear called basal tears, which coat our eyes to keep them healthy. An interesting side note, according to the American Academy of Ophthalmology, is that we make 15 to 30 gallons of tears every year. Now, let's transition to the subject of temperament and how as it relates to the heart. Temperament refers to the different aspects of an individual personality, like extroverts or introverts. It is regarded as innate or inborn and is not learned. One of the most careful studies of temperament was conducted by psychologists Thomas, Chess, and Birch in 1970. They followed the development of children from several weeks through 10 years of age, using observation, interviews with parents and teachers, and psychological tests. They concluded that children do show individuality and temperament in their first weeks of life, independent of how their parents handle them. Those of us who have more than one child know that too. Children seem to give off a different energy and react more or less intensely to stimulation. They categorized 3 general types of temperament in children. 1, easy. 2, slow to warm. 3, difficult. No matter how similar in an intellectual brightness and how many common family gestures and ways of speaking they seem to have, they also have their own unique way in the world. Families also have their own temperament. Each heart in a family energetically resonates with all the other hearts. Depending on which research you look at, the human body has 30 trillion to 100 trillion cells. Each vibrating cell is coordinated by the heart. Multiply that by the number of people in a family. That's an immense amount of shared energy making up the collective temperament of a family. When we as a family or friends hold hands, we connect heart energies, most particularly when we connect right hand to left hand. When a family joins hands to say a prayer or blessing before a meal, they are joining hearts and create an energetic loop of connection. Yoshiki Kuramoto was a professor of physics at Kyoto University in Japan. He researched how like things in close proximity will synchronize with each other in a short period of time. Some examples of this are: a crowd of people begin clapping, and soon they are clapping in unison. Metronomes placed side by side sway into lockstep. If 2 tuning forks are tuned to the same frequency and you tap only one, The second one will soon begin vibrating in sync with the one tapped. 2 grandfather clocks hung from the same beam will synchronize their pendulums in about half an hour. While we each remain our unique self in the family setting, we also integrate with the family in many ways. I have a story to share about twin boys relating to temperament. In 1979, identical twins Jim Springer and Jim Lewis were reunited at age 39 after being separated at birth and placed in different homes in Ohio. Here are just some of the remarkable similarities between these identical twins that lend support to innate energetic connection. Both twins had been named James by their adoptive family. Now, of course, they didn't have anything to do with that. They had each been married twice, the first time to women named Linda, and the second time to wives named Betty. They each named one of their sons James Allen. They each had owned a dog named Toy. They both reported a preference for Miller Lite beer, chain-smoked Salem cigarettes, and drove Chevrolets. They each enjoyed the hobby of carpentry, which they practiced in similar basement workshops, making similar things. They both disliked baseball and said they were stock car racing buffs. They had each served as sheriff's deputies in their respective communities. They each severely chewed their fingernails. Each was reported by their spouses to be very demonstrative in their affection and to constantly be leaving love notes around the house. They had voted identically in 3 prior presidential elections. Both said they were present-oriented rather than past or future-oriented. Both had taken several vacations to the same beach area in Florida. Their blood pressure, weight, pulse rates, and sleep patterns were nearly identical. Both had put on an extra 10 pounds at the same time in their life and had identical brain wave patterns in reaction to stress and suffered from tension and migraine headaches that usually began in the late afternoons and began to occur in their life at age 18. There is a lot we do not understand about the unique and permanent bond that manifests itself between separated identical twins. There's another lesson from studies of identical twins raised apart that has significance. Twin researchers know that identical twins reared apart are more identical than twins raised together. Free of the struggle to differentiate and create an individually unique identity, which is experienced by many identical twins reared together, the energetic bond that exists between all identical twins may be free to play itself out. Now I'm going to share some information from heart transplant patients. I'm not sure what to make of these stories that I'll tell you, but they are part of the information I found, so I wanted to include them. While these events may be in the minority, they are recorded as true accounts. There's a lot of information about heart transplant patients in the book, The Heart's Code, by Dr. Paul Parasail. He was a psychoneuroimmunologist. He lectured around the world to various organ transplant organizations where he collected dozens of accounts of amazing stories that seem to indicate that some type of cellular memory exists and that the heart played a major role in the recovery of these memories. He recorded the reports of 73 heart transplant patients and their families, 67 organ transplant recipients, and 18 donor family interviews. He also interviewed 3 transplant surgeons and collected many anecdotes and clinical experiences from doctors, nurses, and researchers. He heard stories from professional healthcare workers who attended his various presentations. Here's a short history of heart transplants. The first animal heart transplant was done in 1959. The first human heart transplants began in 1967. By 1984, heart transplants began to offer hope for a long and healthy life of those whose own hearts had failed. A new respect for the unique nature and power of the heart began to emerge. The subtle effects on personality and consciousness reported by certain heart recipients, transplant recipients, provided what Dr. Paracel calls the heart's code. Those receiving a new heart may be concerned about how the donor heart will influence their personality. This can be very threatening to the self-concept. These concerns are significantly stronger with heart transplants than any other surgical process. Following their transplant, some recipients reported dreaming about their donor. The most commonly reported cellular memories described by the recipients are new smells and tastes related to those of their donor. They may also have new food cravings, new interests, and a change in the type of music they like. These memories may come along with the cells of a transplanted heart. Now I'm going to share 3 stories with you from heart transplant patients. Although these stories are bittersweet, they reveal interesting information. Glenda and her husband David were in a head-on collision, seeing bright lights headed straight for their car. Moments before the accident, the couple had argued over something silly and were driving in silence. The cars collided, and there was no chance to say, "I'm sorry." Glenda survived, David did not. Years later, Glenda requested to meet the young man who had been saved by the gift of her husband's heart. She waited with Dr. Paracel in the hospital chapel. Glenda is a practicing family physician. She is well versed in bioscience and admires the rigor and healthy skepticism of modern science. Now, however, the power of something that transcends common sense was tugging at her heart. "David's heart is here," she said to Dr. Paracel. "I can't believe I'm saying that to you, but I felt it about a half hour ago." At that moment, the door opened and the young man and his mother walked in. "Sorry we were late," said the young man with a heavy Spanish accent. "We got here half an hour ago, but we couldn't find the chapel." After some awkward small talk, Glenda blurted out, "This embarrasses me as much as it must embarrass you, but can I put my hand on your chest and feel your heart?" After a pause, the young man nodded yes. As Glenda put her hand over his heart, her hand began to tremble and tears rolled down her cheek. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I love you, David. Everything is copacetic." She removed her hand, hugged the young man, and all of them wiped tears from their eyes. Speaking in her heavy Spanish accent, the young man's mother told Dr. Paracel, "My son uses that word copacetic all the time now. He never used it before he got his new heart, but after his surgery, it was the first thing he said to me when he could talk. He said everything was copacetic. It's not a word I know in Spanish." When Glenda heard this, she turned toward them and said, "That word was our signal that everything was okay." Every time we argued and made up, we would say everything was copacetic. The discussion stimulated the young man to share story after story of changes he experienced following his transplant. Described by his mother as a former vegetarian and very health conscious, she said he now craves meat and eats fatty foods. A former lover of heavy metal music, he said he now loves 50s rock and roll. He reported recurrent dreams of bright lights coming straight for him. Glenda responded almost matter-of-factly that her husband loved meat, was a junk food addict, and played in a Motown rock and roll band while in medical school, and that she too dreams of the lights of that fateful night. The next story is about a heart and lung transplant. Through a process called domino transplantation, a patient with failing lungs receives a combination of a new heart and lungs from a donor and donates his heart, if it is still healthy, to another person. This type of transplant is much more successful than a lung transplant only. Dr. Paracel met 2 men who had shared the same heart, Jim and Fred. Jim had nearly died of cystic fibrosis, which affected his lungs, but his heart remained strong. Jim received a healthy heart and lungs from a donor and donated his healthy heart to a man named Fred. It seemed, at least to some degree, Fred had received a large portion of Jim's personality along with his heart. Fred told Jim that the new food cravings he had experienced since getting Jim's heart had persisted, and Jim verified that these had been his own preferences before his transplant. The two men and their wives talked at length about the possibility of the transplantation of temperament. They all four agreed there were significant changes in the disposition of both men following their transplants. They could confirm that Fred's new personality traits did in fact seem to correspond with Jim's prior temperament. Fred had been easygoing, laid back, cool-headed, and carefree until he received Jim's heart. Now Fred is displaying Jim's prior temperament of being a workaholic, moving all the time, like a buzzsaw cutting through life. Jim's wife Sandra said she hardly knows her husband Jim now. Since his heart and lung transplant, Jim is just much cooler and calmer. He does seem to get depressed more often. Of all things, he sends me flowers every month. He used to say flowers were a waste of good money, but now I think he likes them more than I do. I'd like to know whose heart Jim got. Years after that meeting, Dr. Paracel was able to trace the donor of Jim's heart and meet with her family. Jim had passed away before this information was known. His wife Sandra learned that Jim had received the heart and lungs of a young woman whose family said she was prone to depression throughout her life, was shy and soft-spoken, had worked part-time in a flower shop, and had taken her own life over a lost love. Both men continued with the same temperament changes that occurred after their transplants. Now for the third story. When I first read this or heard this story, I had to research to see if it was true. That's how I found the book, The Heart's Code by Dr. Paracel. I also found information online and read about it in a second book. Dr. Paracel spoke directly to the psychiatrist I will mention in the story. It's about two girls, ages 8 and 10. The younger girl, I'll call Kathy, received a heart transplant donated by the family of the older girl, I will call Lois, who was the victim of a crime. After the transplant, Kathy began having nightmares several times a week. She and her mother talked to her doctor, and they referred her to a psychiatrist. It became apparent that Kathy, in her dreams, was reliving the crime committed against Lois. What Kathy told the psychiatrist was so compelling, the psychiatrist called in a detective to hear what Kathy had to say. Kathy knew the time, the weapon, the place, described the man's clothes, and what Lois had said to him. With this accurate information from her dreams, the man was located, confessed to the crime, and was arrested. He verified the words Lois had said to him, and he was sent to prison. This points to the possibility of information being stored in our cells and in some form in our heart. Every experience we have becomes part of us by making deposits in our memory bank. Even transplanted into another body, in some cases, the heart seems to retain some information from the donor. I'm going to cover one last area concerning the heart, and that's prayer and meditation. I really respect HeartMath Institute for their focus on how to have a peaceful, blissful heart, and through that, to have gratitude and show love and kindness to others. In a study of the effects of 5 types of prayer on heart rate variability, it was found that all types of prayer elicited increased cardiac coherence. However, prayers of gratefulness and heartfelt love resulted in definitively higher coherence levels. There has been research done to see if a group of people using meditation, focusing on love, peace, and positive emotions, can affect the rate of violence in a particular city or even greater area. A study conducted in 1993 in Washington, D.C. showed a 25% drop in crime rate where 2,500 meditators meditated over specific periods of time. This means that a relatively small group of a few thousand were able to influence a much larger group in a very positive way. A similar experiment was done during the peak of the Israeli-Lebanon War in the 1980s. Doctors Charles Alexander and John Davies at Harvard University organized groups of experienced meditators in Jerusalem, Yugoslavia, and the United States. They were to meditate and focus their attention on the area at various intervals over a 27-month period. After controlling statistically for all possible variant influences during the course of the study, researchers concluded the levels of violence in Lebanon decreased 40 to 80% each time a meditating group was in place, with the largest reductions occurring when the number of meditators was largest. During these periods, the average number of people killed during the war per day dropped from 12 to 3. War-related injuries declined by 68%. Intensity level of conflict, another of the study's measures, decreased by 48%. The findings suggest that some aspect of consciousness may directly create effects in the material world. When we experience true feelings of compassion, we tend to shift into a more coherent physiological state and are thus radiating more coherent magnetic waves into the environment. Compassion is an emotional state that brings people together and makes them coherent. Prayer for each other and our world is a very important part of our lives. Asking to be anointed and hands laid on us for healing is mentioned in several places in the Bible. Yeshua, as well as others, participated in these prayers. When we gather around someone and lay our hands on them for healing, we are increasing the energy around that person. By being compassionate and loving, we ask God for healing for that person from a place of connection with God. As we become more loving and God-centered, we may see more answers to prayer for healing. As we understand more about the heart, we can become more aware of our social, psychological, and spiritual impact on those we come in contact with. We are being affected and affect others by our words and our actions, by our handshake, hugs, smiles, and even our presence. As we are together each day of this feast, this heart energy that we're enjoying will continue to rise. Being in a beautiful place like this enhances our ability to connect to God, those who love God and His creation. The peaceful energy we feel from being in nature, seeing the plants and animals, and having loving people around us is very soothing and calming. When we leave to go to our respective homes, we will feel a lessening of this positive energy. Even so, we will all carry with us the heart connections we have shared with each other the rest of our lives. Matthew 22, verse 36 through 40. Matthew chapter 22, verse 36 through 40. Master, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Yeshua said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like unto it, Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. 2 Chronicles 16:9. 2 Chronicles chapter 16, verse 9. For the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth, to show himself strong in the behalf of them whose heart is perfect toward him. The Strong's number for perfect is H8003. H8003. It means complete, full, just, made ready, peaceable, perfect, quiet, whole. We have the opportunity to have a perfect heart. As a spiritual family interacting with each other, we are bathed in that spiritual energy. The heart knows, and God knows our hearts. Proverbs 4:23. Proverbs 4:23. Watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flows the springs of life. We are able to connect to God and each other in a very profound way, heart to heart. So. comments or questions or getting the microphone ready.
I now understand excuse me, I'm sorry. I now understand, Shirley, this uptick in joy my wife feels whenever I come near her. I now have a name for it, coherent heart rhythm pattern. So I appreciate that. I've never been able to grasp the name, but now I have.
Okay.
Now you can tell everybody, everybody's going to think you're really smart.
The word you are referring to is tamim. The
Okay.
sacrifice of the lamb. It has to be tamim, without blemish. But it also happens to be the main word back in Genesis, either 25 or 27, that differentiated Jacob from Esau.
Mm-hmm.
He was tamim. And the translators, you could go almost any different direction you want with the word, but he was peaceable. He was a intellectual, thoughtful type person who meditated about the promises of God.
Mm-hmm.
Others?
Can I get a copy of this? My family needs this badly.
It'll all be on the website in a month or so. Yeah, in a month. Yeah. Okay.
Let's face it, folks, the ultimate heart transplant surgeon is Yahweh.
That's right. That's right. Amen to that.
Yeah, we're recording all of these, and after the feast, I'll go through and we'll be enhancing your seminar. We'll have the scriptures you're citing,
Okay.
some graphics to go along with it. It'll be online
Okay.
forever, well, as long as the internet stays up. And then you'll just go to www.lblfeastoftabernacles.com, and it'll say sermon replays, and you just click on there, and you can scroll down and pick all the seminars. And all of our sermons will be up online. So the only thing I would add to your excuse me, my voice, I'm losing it. When you mentioned animals,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought I'd share the story. We had a tornado go through here in December, and I had 2 German shepherds, and I threw them in the bathtub with me.
Mm-hmm.
And the female, I was scared, probably the most afraid I've ever been. You hear something like that coming, and there's roar, and I was scared to death. And she was, 2 years old. Since that time, any time now, I think she hears thunder in the distance. She starts to shake and runs underneath my legs, and she hides. And I think it's because she picked up on the fact that I was so afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Not that she was afraid, but that I was afraid. So I just found that very interesting.
Yes.
And you mentioned that.
Yes.
My son is an electrical engineer for Rolls-Royce,
Mm-hmm.
and he has told me a lot of the things that you said, and I didn't understand it, that the heart has a brain,
Mm-hmm.
and he even says that our DNA has memory. And so there's a lot about the way God has created us that we have not even touched. Our God is so great. And the Bible says that He is beyond finding out. And there are so many things yet that I think God is revealing to people today. And I just thank you so much, Shirley, for that. That was so good. Thank you so much.
You again.
Surely it won't be about Diane. You had made a comment that a scripture bothered you about your heart. Jeremiah 17:9, where it says the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? I didn't quite catch what you said when you investigated that further. What did you find out again about that particular scripture?
Just reading it in context, it's talking about a specific situation with Judah and that the people that had left God. And so the way I've heard it in context is that we all now have an evil heart. And I mean, that just doesn't seem correct. And when I read the other verses, we can have a different heart for God. But that verse has been used to say that, but it seems to indicate it's only talking about, or generally talking about, the particular situation. And then it's been taken and expanded to all the time, which
Right.
the other verses in the Bible doesn't confirm that. Does that answer?
Yeah, so what you're saying is the context of what we're talking about here doesn't apply to universally.
Right.
To our
That's
heart.
what I understood when I looked it up.
Okay.
The carnal versus the spiritual, I guess. And that's what God's recreating a new heart within us, right? God is creating a new heart within us. I think we have here first.
Thank you, Shirley. I have a lot better understanding of the heart and the communication that we have. This isn't really scientific, but I wanted to witness that I used to have a cat, and I'd be sitting watching TV, and it never meowed, it never made a sound to me. When it was ready to go outside, because it was trained to go outside, it would sit 20 feet away from me, and I was very involved in the TV set and the program I'd be watching, and somehow or the other, it got my attention. And I'm thinking it's through the heart, because it never made a sound. I was concentrating on TV, and there was an interruption in my emotions, and I'd look over at him, and he would start walking towards the door. And I always thought there was, back in the 80s and 90s, they talked about telepathic, you know, but there was something different. It wasn't through my brain, because my brain was concentrating on a program. So I really appreciated that, and I think it'll loan a lot to my relationships with people to have more touch and more understanding of how I'm communicating with them. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. I want to make a comment before Todd talks. There's a lot more out there about animals and how there was one study or one situation that was presented. This dog knew when this person she was gone for 30 minutes. The dog knew when she was headed home, because they set this up to tell. The dog would go to the door and sit and wait. And she was 30 minutes away. That dog would sit there till she came home. There's a lot of things about animals, and this is just an overview. There's so much more to all of this. Okay.
There was a sermon in 1986 at Lake Tahoe. Ken Westby was the head of the feast site, and Dr. Charles Dorothy came down from Washington, and he basically supported what you were saying about Jeremiah, the heart being, you can't universalize the heart being deceitful above all things. He said that was greatly misused.
Mm-hmm.
And so congratulations for searching that matter out.
I had a cat, and I had made an appointment for him to be neutered. And so I did get the cat carrier handy, and he disappeared the night before, and I never saw him again.
What a happy ending there. I thought it was going to be something, you know. Oh, say it again. He missed it. He wasn't paying attention.
I had a male cat, and I had made an appointment for him to be neutered. And so I'd gotten the cat carrier handy to take him the next morning. And he disappeared that night. And he never came back.
Notice this. Hard nose. Yeah, hard nose. I noticed the second time around she specified the gender. The first time she didn't. It made much more sense that time.
Thank you. My daughter, Kristen, in the wheelchair here, you've seen her. She won't be here today. But 5 or 6 months ago, somebody gave us a partially trained dog. You've seen the dog. And that dog knows when she's in trouble. And it will come out and bark at me if I'm in the living room and run for the bedroom where she is. And when she has this problems from the waist down, she's paralyzed, but sometimes the nerves work, and her legs will start trembling and cause her to urinate and all this stuff. When her legs start trembling, if you can push on them, it will ease the pain. And the dog will go in there and jump on the bed and lay on her legs when that happens.
Wow.
I mean, it's awesome. The dog's only been with us 4 or 5 months now. And the lady that owned the dog for the first 5 years joined the Marines. And I said, oh, poor girl. You know, but my family experiences growing up and my military experience on top of that, I really need a copy of this. And I have a computer, but it's a communist and it hates me. I really need a copy that I can listen to and play back if that could be had. But thank you guys so very much for what you have done for us here this year. Thank you.
I have one more comment. This has implications for mRNA technology. Too bad people couldn't hear what you presented before they took these shots. Because with people we've known closely, when they're just not the same person.
Must be a religion.
So I just wanted to say that there was one comment during Shirley's presentation that I think will resonate with me for a very long time. And if I have this correct, I think you said that there's a higher coherence level with prayers of gratefulness.
That's heartfelt and grateful.
And
Yes,
okay.
it was significantly higher, it said.
Okay, so I feel like that's speaking to my heart to be more intentional about spending time in prayer or meditation or even sharing with people moments of joy, of thankfulness, and what was the other one you said? Joy,
Joy, love,
love.
gratefulness.
Just to be more intentional about sharing what God has given us with others. To me, it's passing it on. So thank you, Shirley, very much.
I can't help also just one quick comment. All this reminds me of something I heard about when I was a kid. And my mom, it was before the internet by far, and it was a study done in Japan by a scientist of some sort that had to do with, and I guess not so much the heart, but it's got to be connected to some degree, about meditating over water and then looking at the water in a microscope and seeing how the crystalline, or I don't know, microscopic level, things were very beautiful looking, like snowflakey,
Right.
better lack of a better way. And then at the opposite was being angry and hateful over that water, and all those molecules were all messed up looking and chaotic looking, which is, it's got to be connected somehow.
Yeah, I think they freeze it and then it shows what the crystals look like. There's a book about that.
Yeah, I mean, it seems so related
Yeah,
somehow to
Emoto.
this.
Mhm.
You know?
Caroline.
Oh, Caroline, okay.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. I walked in a little late. I got here a little late, but in just what I've heard, it puts the verse talking about when two or more are gathered in my name. It just gives that a whole new dimensional meaning when you understand how the heart affects and the coherency between and how those prayers go to God. I thank you. That is a whole new enlightenment for me.
Exactly on that same thing I was thinking when this gal right here, I'm not sure her name, but when she said that, I was thinking about the Bible scriptures, how it just really does prove time and time again that, well, he says we enter his gates with thanksgiving and praise, and it's just throughout the Bible, death and life are in the power of the tongue, everything just ties together. It's just so beautiful. And we've been really finding too in our congregation too that, man, just like I have a girlfriend back home and she just says, Mel, what are you doing? She'll call for prayer all the time and it's just like, get your hands up, get your hands up. And it's just really been so good for me. I can be cooking in the kitchen and it's like, get your hands up, praise God, just praise and praise him. And it's been so beautiful. Wouldn't you say for us at our congregation too? And then I did have a question. You had said that I loved it, but I didn't catch it, that there's a word, a Hebrew word, I think it was the Numbers, and it said we have the opportunity, you had said, to have a perfect heart, and I thought how beautiful it was, like number 7 something. Was that Tommy?
8003, I think. H 8003.
Perfect.
Oh, that's just so beautiful. How like him, it just ties everything always together.
That came
Thank
up
you so
recently that came up recently too in conversation or discussion that whole might be a better. Todd, maybe you might help. That whole might be a better translation in some of those situations than perfect. Becoming whole.
Right,
We can't be perfect. We can approach it in a try.
right.
Go ahead, Mel, and then we
Well-
have Janine, and then you're next.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for this. This has been so enlightening. It's just wonderful, and I love it. And I want to share experiences that I've had through the years with people that I'm close to. I'll be thinking about them, and they'll call me. And I know that happens with other people too, but it's really something. Thank you.
Janine.
I want to go back to something that Bernard brought up about the water, the frequencies, how words affect
Yes.
the shape of the water,
Yes.
crystal, not the crystals,
The
but just even the
molecules.
ripples of the
Yeah.
water. And anger, loud or boisterous, unharmonic music creates these ugly ripples, and the praise. Our bodies are what, 90% water, 80, whatever it is.
Right.
And so, just the effect of the praises, our music, the words of praise affects our body physically as well as through the heart.
Right, I mean, since we're so much water.
And so
Then-
that's why singing praise, it calms this whole environment.
Yeah, I should have said it before too.
I just wanted to piggyback on something that Todd just mentioned, and it's a really difficult subject. I don't want to try to open a discussion on it right now, but he mentioned that some people think that they're observing changes, personality changes in people who have taken the mRNA shot. And there is more information coming out now that 75 to 80% of those shots may have been degraded and the equivalent of something that was not even bioactive. It may have been the equivalent of saline because they required such an extreme degree of freezing to preserve them that probably wasn't maintained. And also they had maybe 10 shots in one vial, and so the nurses were taking those out, or whoever was administering them, or not carefully maintaining the temperature then. And so Yahweh's good. He's merciful. And so people shouldn't, because they took one shot because they wanted to protect a relative or whatever, or themselves, or they were afraid, they shouldn't be in a state of self-condemnation about that. They need to thank God that they have the health they have and forgive themselves and move forward and become more aware of all of these delicate interactions, because we are such a marvelous creation. That's what we're really doing today, is worshiping Him about the complexity that we can't even comprehend. And we do not need to beware to not let man enter our creation again and alter it. That's
Okay, Janine took my thunder on the water and the body. That was, I was going to talk about praise and worship and prayer and how you feel because your body's mostly water. But the number two, when you were talking about animals and pets, that's why there are so many animals now that can help with seizure patients and diabetes patients and heart patients, because they can feel, their heart knows and their senses know. And it's just amazing how God made them that way.
In the study by Dr. Emoto, there was an interview done subsequent to that, and the interviewer asked the question, well, is it important to have a lot of people, or what are the elements that you're looking for with trying to accomplish this unity? And he said, no, it would be better to have a small number of people with focused unity than a large number where people are distracted, thinking about what I'm having for dinner or what I'm going to wear or what's going on back on the home front. So the people truly putting their hearts and their minds together had a much larger impact than a larger group of people that were distracted.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Back to what Erica said. My brother-in-law, my sister, had this little dog, I forget, cute little dog. And at one point, he kept licking my brother-in-law's ear. Just started doing that, licking his ear. And I thought, that's weird. But he found out later that he had cancer, but the dog knew it before he did, before the doctor did. There's something that the dog said something was wrong. So I think that's heart communication.
Pretty amazing stuff.
That happened to my dad as well. He had a skin cancer. I don't remember where it was. This was several years ago. And the dog he had at the time kept coming up and licking that spot on him. And it wasn't it wasn't an aggressive terminal type cancer, but they were able to get that removed because the dog, like you say, the dog sensed it.
The dog acts weird. It's probably a reason.
Other comments? Any questions or wisecracks? Is it okay if you make? With this crowd, right? I got one comment. Actually, it's relative to some of the talk about the RMNA, whatever it is, and concerns about, well, gee, am I doomed? There's something that recently was brought up in our congregation, that there's that scripture that talks about the sins carrying down through the third and fourth generation. And sometimes we stop there. We don't say the rest of the scripture, of those who hate me. In other words, if your parents or grandparents had some horrible sin going on, right, don't feel doomed that you have to take that burden of the curse of that sin, because it says of those who hate me. So if you don't hate God, you can break out of that curse if you follow his way. We have, again, you said the great physician is the creator. And so he can overcome anything that we mess up here on this planet. You got something?
Yeah, Ruth the Moabitess, through her belief and knowing that the Israelite culture was infinitely better than her own, broke that curse of 10 generations, that they couldn't enter the sanctuary of the Lord for 10 generations. She got in within 1 generation. Wow. She was a daughter of the lady at Jericho, Rahab. She was related to her, not more than 1 generation distant. So if you look at the genealogies. But anyway, the word for physician in the Bible is rapha, which means to make moist or plump, and simple is used for a physician. So Yahweh Rapha is the one who is our healer and our physician, but some people believe it means to restore to original condition. So we've seen a lot of people who've taken the vaccine, thought they were going to die, turned to Yeshua or turned to Jesus, and he answered their prayers, and they came through it.
Others? Anyone? Last call, going to one.
You were talking about animals. We had a black lab that was very comforting when we were grieving, and my son was killed in 2012. And that dog would come over, every time I sat down, come over to me and put his head right there, and just knew that I was hurting. And he did that for several weeks until I started feeling better. The dog just knew. It's amazing how it works.
It is.
Oh, okay, that brings up something that I'd forgotten. Last year at the feast, my husband's dog passed away, and we both have had Yorkies, and she was his. Her heart was bonded to him, and same with my dog. Well, the instant that she died, my dog, still my dog, but took every opportunity it could to comfort. He would actually, and he's not a he's a lap dog. He's not up in your face licking, but I had seen him literally crawl up on my husband's chest and lay his head on the shoulder. And as much as that dog is still mine, he sees a need and he feels it with my husband. And it was like, no, I'm Mama's dog. And that doesn't go on. And it happened instantly after the other dog died.
Anyone else? Going once? Twice. Sold. Shirley.
Thank you for your responses.